So, Jerry, thank you so much for taking the time to do this with us today.
Thanks,
Being
Mallory.
on our executive committee, we love hearing, the wise words and perspectives of all of you. So, thank you for taking the time to do this with us.
It's my pleasure.
Awesome. So, would love to just know, how you started out with Scale Up, and just some of your background and what you're seeing during this time.
Yeah, so just a quick backdrop. I started with Scale Up around the 2013 timeframe. There was an employee that was working for me at the time. I was running an aerospace manufacturing company called MTech, and it was a company that I founded in '96 and subsequently sold in 2014. And Dan Eisenberg from Babson initially got me exposed to Scale Up in the model of entrepreneurial ecosystems, which just intrigued me at that particular time. So this whole what's happening today, what Scale Up does, accelerated growth, critical times but exciting times, all in one.
Awesome. And what are you seeing right now? We'd love to know, how your business is doing during this time, what you think is really important for business owners, and just the general landscape of the economy, how you see some of this turning around, and just some general words of optimism during this
Okay. Okay.
uncertain time.
There's a lot of questions there, and all really good questions. For starters, the three businesses that I own and operate, we're seeing different things depending upon all those businesses are manufacturing companies, and there's one that's in a lab service industry that's dealing with veterinarians. Non-essential surgical procedures are uh, not being fully endorsed right now, even with pets and animals. So that's impacted a little bit, although we're busier in other ways and figuring out things to do. The same applies to two other manufacturing companies. One is a solid surface company in Madison called Vendura Industries. And being a solid surface company, we can add antimicrobial materials, and we can pivot more to the healthcare industries, pivot more to residential communities, assisted living, nursing homes that have really been impacted by the COVID-19. Um, so to go on with some of your other questions that you had.
Yes. So, what do you think is, we're a month in to the quarantine. So, what do you think is the most important aspects of business, and just general business guidance for the next, 30, 60, 90 days?
Yeah, it's such a good question. When you think, and I'm glad you said 30, 60, 90 days, the more, and we can even reduce it down into smaller bite sizes, daily, weekly, monthly, from 30, 60, 90. Working remotely can be challenging, and it becomes more stressful even now the more that you're doing it, although we're getting into the habit of doing what we're doing right now. How are we communicating? When are we communicating? The more structure and standards that you can have, it's a little bit more discipline, but discipline and rigor leads to pace and leads to flow. And the more that you can flow, the more that you can get interaction for some of these pivotal moments that we're going through. And when I think of pivoting, I think of pivoting with our customers. I think of pivoting with how we innovate, and even using the term innovating. It can mean so many things to so many different people in smaller businesses. It doesn't have to be rocket science on an innovation pivot. It can be doing a point of delivery service. It could be working remotely. It could be innovating with the type of product or service that you have. I was just on the phone with somebody down in the water council building, and pivoting from doing water treatments to more antimicrobial bacterial treatments, and working with air, with a core competency, a technology that you have. Or it could be pivoting from being a restaurant and now you're a delivery service. Or so it's innovation, customers, your employees, getting people involved, communicating, cascading messages. It's all part of normal business, that you actually have an opportunity to accelerate that now based on the critical nature of the conditions that we're in.
That's great. And so within kind of that 30, 60, 90, even breaking it down by daily, weekly, monthly, what do you think is kind of the most important aspect of business right now? Is it your overall plan? Is it marketing, cash flow, sales? Is there one thing that you would say, or is it, is it everything kind of working together?
Yeah, it's another really, really good question. And to me, it's always a blend of things working together because that's part of that pace and flow that I was describing. So your finances and your cash flow and cash management working together with your customers. How are your customers doing? Listening to the customer. The voice of the customer is so critical today. Which customers are going to extend out payments? What types of customers will actually bring product in sooner? It doesn't always have to be really bad. It can be really good at the same time. Listening to the customers in relation to innovation. Then working internally with continuous improvement, with being more efficient, more effective than ever before, and then being thoughtful to your people. And for me, I can rattle that off really quickly because it's some of the tools that you use even with the Accelerated Growth Forum, where you talk about growth, you talk about financials, you talk about customers, you talk about innovation, you talk about productivity, and you talk about people. So those are all blended together in an orchestrated and systematic approach to growth.
That's awesome. And I think it flows really nicely into what we were talking about just before we started this, with some really inspirational stories, people being able to pivot, and people inventing and coming up with different revenue streams that they didn't even think were possible before. So what would you say are some just really great case studies and examples of innovation that you've seen come out of this with all the different people and businesses that you touch?
Oh my gosh, there's so many wonderful stories of pivoting, of innovation, of working together. It's somewhat hard to pinpoint one. There's one that was a combination of people that got together last week with the PPE devices and with figuring out with an open source book as to how are we going to work with Children's of Wisconsin and with Radert and other hospitals with providing them with the materials that they need. And that's multiple businesses that got together, from Husco to BioCut to the Innovation Center at UWM to Freighter to Children's, as I mentioned. So that's one particular story. There's a story that I posted recently on LinkedIn from a jeweler called Kane and Kane in West Bend, Wisconsin, and how they're considered to be a non-essential business, and how this husband and wife combo, they put together a bracelet, and the bracelet they called is Pivot because they're having to pivot. They want to inspire other people to pivot. And then they're giving some of the proceeds away to a local hunger task force of such. So those are just a few examples. So it's really interesting times, challenging times, but also very opportunistic times.
Absolutely. You also mentioned, how everything works together, but also how business owners can support their own people.
Mhm.
How do you see that, lasting even after COVID-19 and social distancing? Just the importance of how everyone's treating their employees, being supportive, and what they can
Mhm.
do right now to be
Yeah.
that leader within their organization.
Well, I think before the COVID-19, and it was so hard to find employees, I think that from an employer perspective, the employees will really remember who was treated a certain way by which employer. And the ones that have staying power, you really doesn't treat an employee as on a expense item, which typically, if you look at a profit and loss statement and you look at an operational expense, that's salaries, right? But it's really an asset. It's really human capital. And the more you can leverage human capital, the more we can be sensitive to what people are currently going through, meaning the mental health. How are people adjusting to working at home? Some people might be adjusting better than others. How are people adjusting to new roles? So I think of deployment, and you have a small business and somebody is used to doing payables and receivables and accounting only, but now we want them to do payables, receivables, inventory management, and maybe even a little bit of sales and marketing. The employee is going to be developing better skills. um, the employee is going to be afraid about trying new things and maybe failing. So the more that we can encourage people to help volunteer in different ways to help businesses, the more we can get them involved in what our plans are, the better off we're going to be as individual business owners.
Absolutely. And one last question. What resources would you recommend to business owners? You being kind of in the consultancy world as well,
Mhm.
and just for your own personal use. Are there certain platforms, resources, books that you're utilizing right now?
Well, there's so I'm offering to give out a free copy of my book called Get Unstuck, and it goes through different inflection points to help business owners. As I've been so involved with Scale Up Milwaukee and with the accelerated growth programming, I know that we're delaying that a little bit for this year, but we've got these other cohorts where we're being all inclusive as to what that membership looks like. And if you're a non-member, I would recommend people go to you, get in touch with me, get in touch with other coaching organizations locally. There's so many different people that are willing to help. The use of these virtual tools, such as the Zoom meeting we're having right now, can be really, really effective, and don't hesitate to ask for help. We've got this template that we call a single page plan that we're using with a lot of small business owners, in a blank single page plan where people know what their vision, they know what their mission is, what some of their major goals are, and using that as a template or a tool to help navigate through your business. I'm definitely open to support anyone that's interested in using that tool or a tool like that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for that offer. I know a lot of people find that incredibly useful. So, Jerry, you mentioned your one-page tool that I
Mhm.
think is, really helpful for people to outline kind of a roadmap
Mhm.
and see what they really need to be working on. How have people from our Growth Accelerator and just your other clients, how have they used that tool to really see growth and progress in their business?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a tool in place, the biggest part of the tool is, what are you working on today and how is it impacting your business, especially when you're pivoting? So if you can recreate a single page plan with top initiatives and then the actionable steps that you're taking for a plan. And to me, I call those must do, can't miss items. So every single employee in a moment of truth can make a decision based on behalf of the customer. And if the employees have an appreciation as to where the business is going, how the business is pivoted, they can better support the mission of the business.
Absolutely. And how have our Growth Accelerator participants seen success? Do you have an example of that? And just generally, what do people think is the most beneficial part of that?
I think the most beneficial part of the plan is looking at the 30, 60, 90-day periods. And so we talked earlier about daily, weekly, monthly. The more that gets accelerated, the more focus. So going back to, hey, I can help make a decision or I can volunteer to do something I haven't done before, but it's a top goal. It's a must do, can't miss item to help us navigate. It all comes back to accountability, but not accountability in a punitive way, accountability in a positive way, that I'm engaged, I'm empowered, and I'm motivated to make a difference in this business that I truly believe in.
Absolutely. That's great. So, as we're talking about different case studies and just really, feel good stories that have come out of this, what would you think is, the one that's touched you the most?
Well, I tell you, the one that touched me the most is a gala that was put on by Make a Wish, and Make a Wish has a every year they have a wish night, and this year it had to be canceled for natural reasons, and we did our table via a Zoom meeting. And this wish night, instead of having 600 people attend, ended up having like 6,000 people attend. And it raised, I believe, over $575,000, which was more than the prior years. And it was all virtual. And now it's silent auction items versus live auction items. But it was such a great event for such a good cause. And it was a really fun night, zooming in with our guests and having a cocktail together while doing something for a really good cause.
Oh, that still sounds like a lot of fun,
Oh
even though
my gosh, it
we're
was fun.
together. That's great.